Thank you for calling in. And for those that we're going on an alias right now, this is the individual I'm speaking to is an extremely important, extremely courageous individual, research scientist in environmental sciences at the top 10 university. And the help he has afforded to this battle, to exposing what's in the precipitation falling from our skies, is immense. And again, we'll continue to call you Joe at this point, but can you share with us what you have found in precipitation, starting with surfactants and graphene?
Yes, Dane. So like many of the callers before, you were the one who helped open my eye to what was happening. And being a scientist, I thought, well, if Dane found all of this, I can do my own test and see if I can find the same thing and know for sure whether or not what he's saying is true or not. And sure enough, with the initial test, I started to find aluminum at very high levels, which was concerning. And then I started testing the pH of the rainfall and the snowfall, and those are things that anybody can do. Anybody can go in the store, don't go on Amazon, go somewhere else and buy a pH meter, cheap pH meter, and test the pH of your water, of your rainfall, of your snowfall, and you will see that the pH is extremely alkaline. It should not be alkaline, based on what the EPA says on their website, based on a lot of scientific data that came, and all the things that happened back in the 80s with the acid rain. You know that the acid pH should be acidic, should be in the range of 5, a little bit above 5, for regular pristine rainfall. But what we're seeing is sometimes the pH of the rainfall is above 8, and that's the pH of seawater. So that's not possible unless there's something else being put into the atmosphere that is dragging that pH way up, way higher than it should be. So we continue testing, and we're finding that there is a lot of metals that are not supposed to be in the rainfall, and just shows that, yes, they are spraying materials in the atmosphere. We're seeing a lot of potassium, a lot of calcium, a lot of magnesium, which is not possible to be up there. Some of the other things that we found, like you mentioned, we tested for surfactants, and to my surprise, that was a very surprising thing that we found. Snowfall particularly is very high in surfactants, and again, there should be no surfactant in snowfall. Why would it be there? And then if you look into some of the patent materials that they have, especially for when you talk about graphene and some of these other nanoparticles, if you put them in solution, they will coagulate, they will stick together. And the one way to keep them separated, to keep them apart, to keep them dispersed, is by putting surfactant in the mixture. And that's what they are using to keep things to flow the way they do. And again, we did recently, we were able to find some protocols to test for graphene in the snow, and we also tested positive. So we also now know that graphene is part of the mixture, just as you've been saying for a long time. You've been suspicious that this was present. Now we have confirmation that indeed is present and is also part of the mixture.
If I could hold you right there for one moment, Joe, and just to elaborate on a couple points you've made. First, on the surfactants, yes, exactly the effect that you described, keeping the coagulation from occurring in the dispersions. We see surfactants in some of the material mix from who we believe are the main primary material suppliers. American Elements is one of those. Surfactants also would make the frozen precipitation that we're told is just naturally nucleated snow much more slick, and it is difficult not to try to connect these massive traffic accidents like what just happened on I-81 in Pennsylvania when you have a frozen material, and I know this firsthand from the frozen material that now falls in Northern California. It is of a completely different composition than what has historically been the case, much heavier in many cases, much more slippery, clumpy. It is a very different animal, and so it would be logical to connect the type of instances we see traffic-wise, which are going off the scale, people who thought they knew how to drive in snow and now don't. That's certainly a part of the mix, but infiltrating the entire web of life. And in the case of graphene, for those that don't know what graphene is, it's now in our, and Joe, you found this in liquid and frozen precipitation tests, correct?
Dane, so far only in precipitation, because we started testing this winter, so we have not been able to do it on precipitation yet, because most of our, there is, how the events now happen, right? It starts with the rain, turns into ice, and then turns into snow.
Yes.
So we collected everything that was falling from one event. So there was rain, there was whatever that mixture is, and then there was the snow too. So the short answer is yes, we tested in both, but it only tested during the winter. We want to continue that and do some tests in the spring and summer as well to see if those things are only in the winter or if they are using that throughout the year for some reason or another. We just want to continue testing.
And your point, though, what you brought up, and this is key, all these so-called winter storms now that often start out as rain and then, quote, change over to snow. And that's the term being used by all the climate engineering cover-up agencies like the Weather Channel, AccuWeather, and so forth. So as this precipitation changes over to frozen from liquid, we have patents that call for the use of materials like graphene as a chemical ice nucleating element. And those in power don't care how toxic these elements are. And for those that don't know what graphene is, Graphene, look it up. Look up graphene toxicological effects. It reads like a horror story. It's a vascular machete destroying parts of our body's vascular system and countless other downstream elements, and it can be used for a biological carrier. Can it be used to carry some sort of biological agent from the clouds to the ground? Certainly. And so, again, the ramifications from what's happening in our skies are grave indeed. And the confirmation that you have given us, Joe, again, we'll call you Joe for the moment, it's invaluable to us. I have another question. Working in the circles of academia, what is the response from your academic colleagues when you try to share any information with them that they don't really want to hear?
Yeah, this is another thing that shocked me, Dane. When I first discovered all of this, I tried to bring it up to some of my colleagues in the department I work as a faculty, and I was shocked to their response. A lot of them just ignored. Some of them just rolled their eyes and said that it's not geoengineering, it's just maybe pollution that came down and measured. They will deny, even though they are not doing any tests. They could do all the tests that I did. They are in denial. They will not accept what's happening. And I started thinking, why would they do that? And one of the things that I realized then is that, faculty people, they are very smart, right? They have to be smart to go through the process. But also, I see graduate school as a sieve to sieve out people that are very likely, very willingly to do as they are told and not question authority. Because through grad school, that's what you got to do. You got to be able to do what you're told and not question much, with a few exceptions. There are a few bright people that are very capable of questioning authority and making their own mind. But the vast majority, then, they are not. They are there to do what they are told, and they follow a program, and anything that goes outside their script, it's wrong, it's not right, and they will not go with it. As an example...
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say extremely important points, and those who do question meet with resistance, do they not?
Of course, there is a lot of resistance, and just in this example of those tests that I try to talk to people, they will not accept. And even though I'm a colleague, they know my credentials, they know the work I do, and still to think that what I'm saying is just nonsense, it's beyond me. And it would be very easy then to prove me wrong, to prove you wrong, to prove anybody that talks about geoengineering happening to be wrong. All you got to do is get an airplane that is, you can see the trail, you can see the contrail, right? What they call the contrail behind them, which it's not. But you could just follow a half a dozen of those airplanes. Once they land, go inside and check. Why can't we do that? Why won't the government allow us to go and check airplanes that we see the contrail and go and look inside? That would silence every talk about geoengineering. But guess what? They will never allow that to happen. Why? They
won't allow it. And for those who, again, knee-jerk deny what's happening in our skies without doing a moment's investigation, at geoengineeringwatch.org, as you know, Joe, We have up-close film footage of these aircraft at altitude, nozzles visible, turning on and off. End of debate. They are spraying, period. And as you know as well, because you helped participate with us in this project, we took a NOAA flying lab, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration flying lab, to altitude with top scientists in it, sampled what the heavy aircraft were emitting in our skies, and found exactly what we knew we would find: climate engineering elements. With the valid testing you did in the precipitation, they didn't even investigate. They ignore it because it doesn't fit with their chosen perception of the world. And that's the world we live in fact. It's a matrix in which so many are so dependent on that matrix that they will actually fight to defend it, even though it is pounding the final nails into our collective coffins. And on that note, I want to ask you this: the toxic materials coming down in precipitation, I know this is more in your specialty, of what it's doing to crop production, soils, that is in fact having a very grave effect, is it not?
It is, Dane. So that's a good point. I think that ranges throughout the country because you have areas like California, based on the pictures that I've seen from you, your area is being bombarded with these materials, right? The rest of the country, it is too, but not, I don't think it's as much as you are, or maybe the East Coast is. But what the material does, and that's one of my specialties, once all the aluminum gets in the soil, if you're looking at a soil that has an acidic pH, which most soils that were under pine trees, coniferous trees, they will all be towards the acidic. The aluminum become available right away to whatever is growing in that soil, and aluminum is extremely toxic to plants as well. It will kill the plant if there is enough aluminum soluble in the soil. And for certain acidic soils that have been under this program and this the engineering for a long time, you'll have enough aluminum to kill the plant in the soil. Now, when you move to areas where the soil is more alkaline, like in the Midwest, there's a lot of soils that are still alkaline, then that aluminum is going to not be as detrimental because aluminum is not very soluble under alkaline conditions. It will stay in the soil. It will sit there dormant, right, let's say. But what happens is soils that are under food production, like your grains or your horticulture crops, like a lot of that in California, they use a lot of ammonium-containing fertilizer. And ammonium will acidify the soil. So you can say that most of the soils under crop production are all severely impacted by this amount of aluminum that is falling down. And that's a funny question you ask, Dane, because I don't know if you're aware of this or not, or your listeners. But right now, one of the most famous yogi from India is doing a third country motorcycle ride to highlight that the soils of the planet are dying. He's not linking with the geoengineering because I don't know whether he doesn't know or whether he doesn't want to say, because like you say in many of your broadcasts, once people start talking about this, they for sure will lose their NGO status, and then they will have to start paying taxes on the money that the donations that they receive. And I don't think that's the point he wants. I think he's trying to tell people the soil is dying and they need to do something about it. What's wrong with it, right? So he's trying to highlight that things are happening that we need to stop doing before it's too late. I think he's saying that we don't have a lot of time. I think he's giving like a couple decades before all the soils are dead. And you know that a couple decades is way too long. We have maybe a half of a decade left before the soils are not productive anymore. Not because of the aluminum alone, but because of the whole package of what's happening throughout the atmosphere. Go ahead, Dane.
Well, all those points are extraordinarily important that you bring up. First, I want to back up to the soil's pH changes. We have monitored this in Northern California, in my region on the east side of Lake Shasta, with USDA soil scientists that I know personally, I know well, been in the field with them doing this testing. We've seen soil pH values change here. There's so much metal in the rain, so much loading of that metal into the soils. We've seen soil pH changes here go up 10 to 12 times toward alkaline, from 5.4 and 5.5 up to 6.5 and 6.8. And for those that don't know, on the pH scale, that's a magnitude of 10. 1 point on that scale is a magnitude of 10. That's how much metal is in the rain. and it is having a profoundly horrific effect on the forest. The entire forest is indeed dying. And this is where we have a truly double-edged sword as we continue to load the atmosphere with carbon by the burning of hydrocarbon fuels. We increase the acidity of that precipitation, which is increasingly making that aluminum that's now being saturated into our soils more and more bioavailable. It is truly a downward spiral, and the crashing of crop production is here. It's not coming. It's not off on the horizon. It's here. And yes, you're correct about those environmental groups, all of them. And our attorneys at geoengineeringwatch.org have spoken to attorneys from every single major environmental group, Greenpeace, Sierra Club, WWF, Earth Justice, all of them. None of them will touch geoengineering for exactly the reasons you cited. They don't want to lose their 501c3 nonprofit, so they pretend climate engineering isn't happening. And that's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. And I think in your position, too, obviously you have to stay anonymous, and you would chance losing any support or grants for your work if it was known that you're trying to bring light to this issue. That is certainly the case, is it not?
It is, and that's why, I wish it was a point where we don't have to stay anonymous and it can be all crystal clear, so people could go and look at my credentials and see what I've done and who I am, and decide for themselves whether or not they want to believe. But society is under such a spell that it will make no difference whether or not I say who I am, right? It's not going to change much to the whole, but you're right. I could lose much of the support I have to do the work I do, even though I'm trying to do the best I can to revert the situation. It's still very difficult, when you try to come up with proposals to get federal funding to do work that it's relevant, people will look at it and be like, this doesn't make any sense because none of this is happening. And so we don't get any funding to do what we want to do.
They blindly believe the official narrative, of course, those that are paying their paychecks and pensions, and therefore without any investigation, they jump to those conclusions, and then this type of work is completely eliminated, no matter how dire it is.
That's true.
Joe, my regard for you is immense. I'm so grateful that you have worked with us at geoengineeringwatch.org. I want to have you back on the broadcast soon. And for those that have not seen it, the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which the scientist on the phone with me right now participated behind the scenes in, The Dimming is available for free at the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Absolute conclusive proof of climate engineering operations being conducted in our skies with grave consequences. Please view, share that. Social media is trying to censor it. Please help us to circulate that film.